Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hebba Youssef.
People leave a job because, they don't have a good boss or they don't like their boss. Mm-hmm. But the second biggest reason is because they don't understand why they're paid the way they're paid. And that's a huge thing for transparency, is that we're now seeing a ton of laws add on a different level of transparency, which is not just for the candidates who are coming in, but they're adding a different level. Rhode Island and California have this where if you're a current incumbent employee, we can go to your Hebba and you can say, hey, I want to know what a senior corporate attorney makes at this company. Can you give me a range?
And I have to tell you.
Yeah, and you have to tell me.
Understanding your direct reports, avoiding team burnout. Those sound like worthy causes, right? PI Inspire promotes leadership at every level. Stop losing good people to avoidable issues like poor communication and a one-size-fits-all management approach and inspire them instead. Learn more at predictiveindex.com. Welcome back to another episode of the I Hate It Here podcast. I am so pumped today. I'm kicking off a 2-part season finale today. And my first guest is Lulu. Lulu, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I am so pumped to have you here. I haven't told anybody yet what we're talking about, but I'm doing this type of episode called a perspectives episode where I bring on somebody who's an expert in the space. And so today's conversation is going to be about pay transparency, and I have brought in a lawyer and someone I consider an expert in the space. Lulu, would you like to tell everyone what it is you do and how you became an expert in the pay transparency space?
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Lulu Seikaly. I am a senior corporate employment attorney with Payscale. Payscale is a compensation and HR company that we help employers. We have over half of the Fortune 500 companies, but we help employers be confident to know the what and why behind their pay. So we help them with data and technology and services to make sure that they're paying their folks fairly.
I love it. Big Payscale fan. Big fan of any company that helps HR teams figure out how to be pay transparent. So on the note of that, I feel like we connected over this. I'd watched your LinkedIn posts for a little bit all about pay transparency. And I was like, I have to connect with this woman because I have to have her on the podcast and hear her take on it. You're an employment lawyer, but your space right now is pay transparency. So for HR people listening, what are things we need to know about the recent pay transparency laws? I feel like just the other day, a new state passed a law. Every day, it feels like.
Every day. Washington, D.C., where you reside, just recently passed a pay transparency law, which is amazing. We have some time before it becomes set in stone, but I think it's gonna get there.
Of course.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. But we've seen just so many states come up with pay transparency. Colorado was the first state back in January of 2021. Then in 2022, when I started at Payscale, I was a litigator before I came to Payscale. I was management side litigator. So I didn't really know much about pay transparency or pay equity. So I was really fortunate to come to Payscale with an amazing bench of women who kind of taught me all about pay equity and pay transparency and what that means. So I became kind of I'm a big legislative nerd. I love following laws and seeing what laws pop up. So I started just tracking all things pay equity and pay transparency. And my first year at Payscale was 2022, and that was the year of the Great Resignation. And we just saw so many states try and propose pay transparency laws, but only California and Washington that year were successful. So beginning of January 2023, California and Washington became states 2 and 3 to pass pay transparency laws. Then New York State passed a pay transparency law in September of 2023. So now we've got 4 states, if you're keeping count. And then Hawaii became the 5th state in January of this year. And we're going to see Illinois become the 6th state in January of 2025, which is amazing. And then we are recording this podcast before it drops. So we're recording it in February. But even in February, we've seen almost 10 states either propose or almost pass pay transparency laws, which is totally mind blowing. So Virginia is probably going to be next.
Yeah.
Maryland is probably coming up soon. New Jersey, Maine, Wisconsin. We've got so many states, all kind of in the Northeast, if you can't tell, who are about to be passing pay transparency laws, which is amazing. So curious to see how many are successful. But what we've kind of noticed is that pay transparency laws are the most successful in states that tend to lean blue or Democratic versus red or Republican. So, for example, in 2023, I got super excited because Montana and West Virginia proposed pay transparency laws, but unfortunately, they didn't go anywhere. But I'm hoping they get revived. But it's awesome because that means like lawmakers are thinking about it. Like they really understand how important it is. So despite where you live, pay transparency. I always say this, it's coming to a state near you. So just buckle up and get ready.
What is driving it at the state level? Also, like, I don't know if you ever watched Schoolhouse Rock growing up, but they made us watch like how a bill becomes a law. And you were just talking and I was like literally remembering Schoolhouse Rock, like how a bill becomes a law. And I was like, why am I thinking about this right now? It just unlocked a part of my brain. You're like talking about laws and I'm like, why am I thinking about Schoolhouse Rock right now? But what do you think is driving this? Like who's showing up and saying like, we should have pay transparency?
It's social pressures. It's 1,000,000% social pressures. Pay transparency is a tool. So there's a bunch of tools that legislatures have kind of put forth to try and attempt to close the gender and racial pay gaps. So unfortunately, still in 2024, the uncontrolled pay gap, so that's just comparing men to women generally in the US, is still 89 cents to the dollar, which is like insane. The controlled pay gap, which is comparing women and men in the exact same jobs that they're doing, is slightly better. Like we're at 1 to 2 cent difference. It's still low, but it's still 1 to 2 cent difference. So that's good news. But pay transparency is one of the tools that legislatures have put forth. I think social pressures is a huge thing. But the second thing is that they really want to start closing the gender pay gap here. Because when you have pay transparency, you're not just like throwing a dart at a board and saying like, and today I am going to pay Hebba $100,000 for, working in HR. You have to do the work.
We decided $1 million.
$900,000. I think is what we decided.
$900,000.
Not quite $1 million. We're going to be level-headed here.
Not quite $1 million, just $900,000. Yeah, we're going to move around. But you're right. No, like I don't get to pick my salary, unfortunately.
No.
Right.
And it gives candidates kind of like the tools, the negotiation tools too, right? Like they're not going to go in blind anymore applying to jobs. They're not going to be like, I have no idea what this job is going to pay. Should I ask for $80,000 or should I ask for $200,000? Like you have no idea what a good salary is. So when the employers do the work and kind of limit what the ranges are and have done the work on the back end, and they're going to offer the salary regardless of who they're offering it to, a man, woman, Hispanic, Black, white, whatever, it's going to be the same, right? So it kind of gives the candidates the upper hand here in negotiation power.
I do really love the societal pressure that now we're putting on for pay transparency. I mean, like I'm very pro pay transparency. I've seen all the benefits. I know what it does for an organization, the culture, the people. And so that excites me about having this conversation with you today, because I think there's a lot to dig in on how companies are really thinking about it and the legal pressures we feel potentially day in and day out as HR people to either abide by the law or know like these laws are coming and we should be aware. When it comes to the rest of the world, how is the rest of the world dealing with pay transparency?
Oh, it's so interesting. We may need like a separate podcast to talk about the rest of the world, but
part two
here. So the European Union, if there's any legislative nerds here, like send me a message on LinkedIn later. I had to learn all about the EU parliamentary procedures because the European Union passed something called a pay transparency directive. It is a behemoth piece of legislation. And just one part of the legislation is going to require employers in the EU to post salary ranges like we see on the US side. Ooh. But the thing is, they have each of the 27 member states, so each of the 27 countries part of the EU, have until June 2026 to transpose. Did not know this word existed until I had to do the EU stuff, but they have to basically pass a law complying with the directive before June 2026. Then we also see in Canada, our neighbors to the north, we have a couple provinces that have passed pay transparency laws. So Prince Edward Island, British Columbia was the big news story last year. And then Ontario, right before Thanksgiving of last year, just proposed a pay transparency law too. So it's sweeping the countries. I mean, it's sweeping at least the developed countries, which is really exciting news. So I have an internal joke with some of my coworkers at Payscale about the EU law that we have some friendly bets going on, like which country is going to be first to pass the directive. I think I already lost because there's rumors of who it's going to be, so I think I already lost, but we'll see.
Oh, what are the rumors?
The rumors are France is going to be the first one, which I was like floored by.
Oh, I did not see that
I thought
coming.
Germany.
I thought you were going to say Germany or the Netherlands, because the Netherlands are very... I was like, oh, France?
I was like, really? I thought France was going to be like one of the last ones. I lived in France after college, so I mean, like, I know how the French works. So I was like, I thought France was going to be one of the last ones. I thought Germany for sure was going to be at least one of the top 3. So that was my bet going. But we'll see if they get their act together.
Interesting. Awesome. So it depends on when the state it actually goes into effect. So when we're thinking from like an employer perspective, what kind of challenges are employers facing when they're actually trying to implement pay transparency? And how have you handled, because we're in so many different states, right? And I think this is the question that trips a lot of people up. Like, is it the state that my company is in? Is it the state that the employees are in? And then how do I make sure I'm abiding by it for everyone?
It's a really tough question. And 9 times out of 10, I say, if you're not best friends with your employment counsel, now is the best time to become best friends with your employment counsel. But I'll try and just kind of like consolidate it, like just digest it as easily as I can. Most of the states say that, actually, I would say all of the states say that you have to post a range where an employee works. So the example I always give is I live in Dallas, Texas. In Texas, we don't have pay transparency laws. I don't imagine we ever will, at least in the foreseeable future. But if a company in Austin, for example, a tech company in Austin decides like we need a ton of engineers, they can be remote, we can hire them anywhere. According to California's law, Washington's law, and Colorado's law, you have to post a salary range if the job can be performed in one of those states and you have a presence there.
Ooh.
Right? New York State took kind of a different pathway. And we're seeing a lot of states actually do what New York has already enacted, which is, well, New York State's saying, well, that doesn't make sense. If there's no connection to our state, why the heck would you ever have to post a range? So New York State says, if the job can be performed in New York State, or it must be performed in New York State, so like button chair in an office in the state of New York, or if I'm working remotely and I report to an office in New York State, or I have to report to a boss in New York State, then you also have to post the range.
Oh.
But like a rando software engineer in California, if there's no connection to New York State, they don't have to post a range. But what we're finding is that large companies, like you mentioned, a lot of companies with tons of presence around the country are just saying, we're doing the work already. We're already preparing for pay transparency. We're just going to post the range regardless of where the job can be performed. Even if we're hiring directly in Texas, we're going to post that range because, believe it or not, in the next 6 years, so by 2030, 30% of the workforce is going to be Gen Z. And Gen Z is expecting ranges in job postings. Like I'm an elder millennial. To me, I'm like still slightly uncomfortable talking about my salary with people I don't know very well. Like I'll talk about it with my friends and my family, of course, but like I won't talk about it with my coworkers, which just seems kind of weird, but I think that's just a generational thing. But if I'm just perusing LinkedIn for jobs, and if I see a job posting that doesn't have a range in it, my thought is, what are they hiding? This is like my favorite analogy I came up with on the spot one time, which was, it's like caller ID. Before a time of caller ID, I'm sure you remember too, we used to like pick up the phone like savages, like not knowing who the heck was on the other end of the phone. Like, was it the boy I was crushing on in school, or was it like, somebody from my dad calling, or was it a telemarketer? Like, we had no idea. Now, I probably get 25 phone calls a day from numbers I have no idea who they are, and I don't pick up one of them. I think that that's where pay transparency is coming, and applying for jobs is becoming like that, which is like, we don't want to apply blind anymore. We don't want to go in with a completely different expectation of a salary and not be aligned with that organization and waste anybody's time. So we're seeing a lot more employers, and actually a lot of our customers are just saying, to heck with it, we're just going to post the ranges regardless of where the job is, if we have to legally or not, because we know it's going to be better for our retention of our talent. It's going to be better to attract the best talent. It's truly like the easiest, cheapest well, maybe I say cheapest with like an asterisk, the easiest, cheapest like branding opportunity. Because if you're an employer that doesn't have to post a range and you're posting one, you're like, hello, here's how we value our employees. Please come work for us.
I think it's a big accountability mechanism, honestly, especially for HR teams. A lot of HR people I know are excited about the pay transparency laws because they have executives that don't want to post the salaries. And now they can say, oh, but there are laws that say we have to.
Amazing.
And I kind of love that. I kind of love that. I'm like, well, if you don't want to do it, sorry, it's the law.
Well, but there's still some employers, unfortunately, that are just kind of like, is honey badger still like a term people understand?
I don't know what that is.
They're like honey badgers. They're just like, we don't care what you think. We're just not going to post ranges. If we get caught, we'll pay the fines and then we'll post later. Like we're seeing companies who are doing stuff like that, and they're getting blown up on, like Morning Brew and like other, like Hannah will probably blow them up.
Yes.
But it's like, it's just such a missed opportunity because, and I used to tell my clients this when I was in private practice, which was, I would rather y'all get it right and not have to pay me my hourly rate to fight with a judge as to why you got it wrong. Like, it's not going to be good for anybody, right? Like, you're going to be paying me my legal fees when you could have put that back into your employee population.
I mean, like, I don't get it. What's the big aversion to posting the salaries? What are people really afraid of?
There's two things I've heard of. One is that they're not ready.
When are you ever ready?
Right.
Just gotta do it.
I mean, back in the day, they just like threw a dart at the board and they were like, and today we're going to pay Lulu this much money, right? Like now organizations have to have structure. They have to have compensation philosophies. They have to use data. They have to use technology to benchmark their roles. They can't just say, and today I feel like paying a software engineer $500,000 because that's the going rate for one. Like, no, you can't do that, right? So preparation is a big thing. A lot of companies are too afraid to dive into that preparation because, I mean, it is a heavy lift. If you've never leveled your jobs or done job architectures or budgeted for roles or made salary ranges, like it's a lot of heavy lifting the first year, but that baby goes on autopilot the following years. You just have to adjust. Like, I mean, we're doing mid-year, we're doing end of year right now. I was just on a call to talk about end of year right now. And we have, I mean, obviously we're Payscale, but we have all our systems kind of like in place. But we also grew by acquisition. So there's still some holes and some things that we have to plug because when you bring all these companies together, there's obviously different levels and architectures and things like that. So that's the first thing. The second thing we hear about is we don't want our competitors to know how much we're paying.
Why not? They're going to take your employees. They're going to take your employees.
100%. Right? I mean, we see most people who leave a job, I mean, we hear this all the time. People leave a job because, they don't have a good boss or they don't like their boss. Mm-hmm. But the second biggest reason is because they don't understand why they're paid the way they're paid. And that's a huge thing for transparency, is that like we're now seeing a ton of laws add on like a different level of transparency, which is not just for the candidates who are coming in, but they're adding a different level. Rhode Island and California have this where if you're a current incumbent employee, we can go to your Hebba and you can say, hey, I want to know what a senior corporate attorney makes at this company. Can you give me a range?
And I have to tell you.
Yeah, and you have to tell me, right? So, I mean, that's the end of it.
Somebody was saying, I can't remember who was talking to me about this. It might have been you, actually. There's pay transparency. And then there's this other thing called like opportunity transparency, where you also have to tell your employees about upcoming roles that might be available.
Yes.
Have you seen any laws that have talked about that?
I'm not sure if this is 100% what you're talking about, but there are some of the laws that say that in addition to posting the range for like a brand new role or a backfill role, if there are opportunities for promotion or transfer internally, you also have to advertise that.
Yes.
So some of the states are requiring that also.
Oh,
isn't that insane? It's amazing. I love it. I absolutely love it.
I love it because I can think of every single time I've worked somewhere, I've been like, what's the next step? And my boss can't tell me. Or my boss tells me, okay, it's just a senior title, but it's literally the exact same work. And I'm like, what's the point of the senior title? Well, do I at least get more money? Like the chances are, yes, you do. But I find that very interesting because I think a lot of promotions, I might get a lot of shit for this, but a lot of promotions just kind of happen on a whim where people are like, well, this person's been here 3 years. We might as well promote them.
or the person threatens to leave and they say,
And then,
oh, what about if we promote you? Will you stay? And it's
yeah.
like, yeah. But like, that's a great way to do it on comp statements. Like, why not just, like every year when you get a comp statement, maybe I'm adding work for you, Hebba, so I'm sorry. But like, maybe like on the comp statement for, like every year, like end of year, you say, okay, Lulu Seikaly, senior corporate counsel, this is the salary range. The next level up is a senior director. This is what that range looks like. Just add it onto the comp statement. That way they know, what does your progression look like? And there are, like Rhode Island, for example, is required to do that on comp statements now. Other states like Pennsylvania, and there were like a couple, like 3 other states, maybe Connecticut, they proposed something similar and it hasn't gone anywhere yet. But I'm hoping that catches on. So like internally at Payscale, we call it pay communication legislation, where you're going to be required to communicate more about someone's pay and like maybe even break down what the benefits look like. Like, how much are we paying for your healthcare? How much are we paying to your 401k matching? Like, this is your total comp. Like, it's not just about base salary anymore. It is your total comp statement every year.
That would create a lot of work for HR teams too. The thing is like that the work is good. And I think a lot of HR people would be happy to do it because then at least they have the guidelines and the boundaries for every single executive who's like, we have to promote this person. They're so important. Or we must hire this person at this level because they're so important. I feel like HR people are fighting those battles every day. And so to have the legislation say you have to do something, to me, I'm just like, great, that's one less battle I have to actually fight, where I can just point to something and say, we can't do that because of this. Or we have to be honest and tell the person what's coming next and they need to know, and we all need to be in agreement on it. And the manager needs to be trained on having that conversation.
The best part, this just triggered a thought for me, but what you just said was, we have to bring this person at this salary or else we're going to lose them. The other thing about pay transparency that's so positive, which is if an HR team has their house in order before they post a role, they're not just like willy-nilly throwing a salary range up there because that's what they feel like the range should be that day. If like the hiring manager, and I'm sure you've seen this all the time, if the hiring manager decides to negotiate with the candidate instead of like talent acquisition or HR, I see your face. What, does that ever happen? Never happens. Never happens. But if they try and negotiate with the candidate, HR can come back and say, look, we've done the work on the back end. If we offer this person 20% more than the top end of the range that we've already budgeted, we're going to run into pay equity issues with the rest of the incumbents on the team. So, I mean, again, like that's another kind of feather in the hat, which is like, we need the pay transparency laws. Like, and we, our customers say this all the time. We ask them all the time when we do webinars, what is stopping you from enacting pay transparency? And usually one of the top 2 or 3 answers is, we can't get leadership buy-in. And this is a great way to get leadership buy-in, which is like, we won't have pay and equity issues. The EEOC recently came out and said, hey, guess what? For the next 4 years, we're really going to start combating pay discrimination. So you've got that. Plus, you've got the fact that like you're saving money doing it. So you're not just like throwing money out the window, just deciding you're going to pay an engineer $500,000 because you feel like it. So, I mean, and it gives HR a lot more confidence to go to the leadership and say, we have to do this, instead of dragging someone like me into the meeting and I have to tell an ELT member, so it's probably not a great idea if you guys want to do that because we're going to get sued. And let me tell you how much it's going to cost.
Everybody knows they can get sued, but lately I've observed people that are like, we're not going to get sued. It doesn't matter. Or I don't need to post those ranges. So like when it comes to pay transparency, like I have a lot of questions from like the employee perspective on like the rights that employees actually have. But when companies are trying to navigate these laws, do you have any advice for them when it comes to like that adherence? Because I see so many companies that just don't seem to care. And it's kind of sad.
It is sad. I mean, all the laws so far, so Colorado, California, Washington, New York State, and Hawaii all have enforcement mechanisms on them. The problem is that you have to have somebody who has what we call in the legal world standing to bring a claim. So like a candidate sees a job posting, sees that there isn't a range, can then bring a complaint forward. And it'll take time. It takes money. It's a pain for all parties involved. But what we're seeing right now, I mean, so there's penalties associated. Everyone can bring, there's lawsuits, like the laws allow people to bring private claims in a court of law also. So it can be very expensive. A lot of states say like, your first violation, we're going to send you a warning letter. If you don't fix it, it's going to be $1,000 per violation. And $1,000 per violation could potentially be per person per posting. So if you have one posting up for like a week and 1,000 people have seen that posting, I went to law school, so I didn't have to do math. So 1,000 times 1,000, whatever that is.
Not 2,000.
No, I think it's like 100,000.
I was going to say, is it 100,000? I'm literally like, know. What is wrong? It's the end of the day on a Monday. So whoever's listening to this and you think we don't know how to do math,
so
I'm just going to be honest. It's the end of the day on a Monday after Super Bowl weekend. Like, please, I'm so sorry. Like,
yes. No, it's totally fine. We're going to go with that just for the pure of this thing.
For math being easy. Yep.
Mm-hmm. For math being easy. So if somebody doesn't post a range, it's going to be really expensive. And then you're going to have big influencers blast you on social media. So the court of public opinion to me is like a much worse situation than getting a lawsuit filed against you. There were some pretty well-known companies when California and Washington's law got enacted at the beginning of last year, so in early 2023, that decided they were going to be cute and post ranges
that were absurd. I saw one.
$90,000 to $900,000 was a range I saw. And I looked at it and I said, that is, because the law says you have to post either a good faith range or a range in which you reasonably believe you're going to pay for a role. Like $1 million spread is not a reasonable range. I will put my full salary on that. But it comes to find out the companies, the way that they validated that range, they said, this was our total compensation range, which is not what the law says. Yeah. Right. Because if you like put equity in there, if you put other benefits, especially like if you're a much higher level, like maybe that could be the width of the range, but that's not the intention of the lawsuit of the law. But then we see Washington State has 31 companies that have had class actions filed against them because some of these companies weren't posting ranges. So, I mean, it's happening. And with social media being as quick, you can find out so much information so quickly on social media that, you probably will have a lawsuit filed against you. But like if you see a Gen Z influencer, TikToker finding out about how crappy you're being to your candidates, it's going to get blown up and it's going to be really hard for you to find people to come work for you.
The world of work has changed for good, but many HR performance management tools just don't cut it. Enabling performance in the modern world of work requires a modern approach, one that's agile and asynchronous, but still fosters connection and collaboration. Have you heard about PI Inspire? It was designed specifically for today's performance management challenges. It helps you gain a deep understanding about yourself and your team and share personalized insights to help you learn how to manage and develop each direct report. Meet people where they are and start developing new leaders at every level. Learn more about PI Inspire at www.predictiveindex.com. I remember that job range from 90 to 900. I was like, I'll take the 900. Thank you. Bye. That's like literally how my brain was. I was like, I'll take that 900. See ya. Thank you for that job. No, the court of public opinion is very interesting because people will go to LinkedIn, they'll go to Twitter, and they'll make it very clear that you've done something bad. And like, I feel like almost everybody is for pay transparency now. I never see anyone in the comments that's like, leave them alone. They couldn't figure out what the range was. Everybody's like, why are you all trying to lie to us? So I do think it's very important that companies care about it less from a sense of like, I'm going to get sued, and more of a sense of like, I want to attract amazing top talent, and I'm not going to do that by like hiding the pay range.
And I think too, like the timing is interesting because like in 2022, there was the Great Resignation. And I think companies were really freaked out because like people were jumping ship, moving to higher paying jobs. Now, unfortunately, we've had how many rounds of layoffs, especially in tech, where
so many this year.
It's so sad. It's horrible. But like now candidates don't have the upper hand anymore. So unfortunately, like I hear from people who are operating in states without pay transparency laws. They're the older generations. I will make that very clear. It's not younger generations. But they always ask me, why do I need to comply? There's no reason for me to comply. And a lot of them are small businesses too, because the small businesses are saying, we don't have the bandwidth, right? Like maybe they only have one person who's the CFO and they do all HR and they also have to do compensation. And they're like, I don't have the time to figure out what a range looks like. But at the same time, it's like, now it's going to be necessary. Like you want to keep your folks, you want to attract more people who are going to be really great and really help your company grow. Like you're going to have to do that work.
The power shift in the balance of scales between like who has the power from employee to employer has just felt like whiplash the last few years, from the Great Resignation to now all the layoffs. And my fear is like companies in this time when they have power choose to do not great things. And I think a lot of HR people that I know and myself personally, like just because some employers think they have the power does not mean we should be doing bad things to the employees and not caring ultimately about how they are treated. And I think there 100%. Are some employers who have.
But that's why HR is so important.
Thanks.
Like you.
I love
You're an advocate.
Thanks. You're welcome. I do love that. I feel like a lot of HR people don't get a lot of appreciation. I think it's like a common theme. We're like either hated or misunderstood or just disliked at every organization. But I know so many great HR people who are trying day in and day out to do the right thing by employees because they recognize like so many people have been hurt by their employer, and also they want to put out good in the world. And so the HR people I work with, while they're dealing with challenges, at the end of the day, I still have met so many HR people that are like, I truly care about the people that work at this company. And I don't think that's the case everywhere, which is why HR gets the terrible rep it does. But I do think as more Gen Z joins the workforce and more millennials become leaders and are the C-suite, I think we're going to see a shift in work where it does become really focused on how do we actually treat people every day, not how do we milk them for all they're worth. I don't know. Is that too optimistic?
No, I think I have to brag on the Payscale people team. I have never worked with more passionate, incredibly intelligent people than I have at the Payscale people team. Like every day they shock me at how amazing they are. Like they're just so thoughtful. And they know, like, I mean, I told them when I first started, if you come to me requesting permission to terminate somebody, there better be a long email laying out all of the touch points that you've had with that person, giving them notice of performance improvements or whatever it is. Like, it should not be a surprise to them. And I said it once when I first started over 2 years ago. And like every email I get is just amazing. But going back to the bad rap, I think you and I bonded of our love for The Office. And Toby Flenderson is like not a great example of what HR should be.
Awful. The worst.
Horrible. Like he is, I mean, at the time the show was on, like that was kind of the normal thought process of like what HR looks like. But it has like completely shifted. I mean, even I practiced in California for a long time in Sacramento, and a lot of my clients were like the older generation HR people, and it wasn't cool to be in HR. Like they kind of just did things. They were kind of like Toby-ish, I guess, like in terms of how they operate. But I mean, at the same time, it's like now we're getting a bunch of younger people into these HR roles, the more compassionate people. You know, like you said, you never want somebody to feel like we've all had that one experience where we're just like, we never want somebody to feel like I felt in X experience. So, and that's how I look at it too. I mean, I'm an extension of our people team at Payscale, but like there has been a time in my life where I'm like, I never want someone to feel the way I felt in that situation, like very early on in my career. So, I mean, it's the same thing.
And when it comes to pay, just like all the studies have shown, like the more transparent you are with pay, like the less inequity there actually is. And we're dealing with a world where there is still a gap between men and women in pay and men, women, and women of color. And that's why we have those equal pay days. And they're so far in the year, if that's how long it's going to take somebody to achieve equal pay. And we're going to potentially achieve pay equity when I'm not even on this earth anymore. Like I look at those stats all the time, and it keeps me up at night thinking women are doing the same quality and level of work and being paid less is still just very disheartening across the board.
I mean, there's all these, like, we have our chief evangelist at Payscale. Her name is Ruth Thomas. She is just a firecracker, but she always talks about the maternal penalty, but women go out on maternity leave and like how far behind they get because they've taken time off, either just in like the 12 weeks or whatever it is, or because they, yeah, like my mom, when growing up, she's a nurse. She took time off. Like she stayed at home with me and my brother until my brother was 16, then went back to work. Like there are women who take large gaps. I think maybe now it's a little less than what it used to be, like with our parents growing up. But I mean, that maternal penalty is a huge, huge thing. And then we're seeing too, like, there's other mechanisms that we have on the legal front that are helping us close the pay gap. So outside of pay transparency, we have these salary history ban laws in like 30 states, meaning that talent acquisition folks can't ask you, well, how much are you making at your current role, right?
Yeah.
So they don't lowball you later. So we've got stuff like that. I mean, we've got obviously pay transparency, in Illinois, Minnesota, and California. They've taken a page out of Canada's and the EU's book about pay reporting, like submitting pay data outside of EEO1 reporting, but the pay data broken down by gender and race and age. I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think when we have more states start requiring this on a national level, we'll be in a better position, because right now it's 1 in 4 employees are affected by some sort of pay transparency law. And that has to do with remote work. It has to do with how many people live in New York and California and Colorado and Washington. But like 1 in 4 is a huge number.
That's wild. Yeah.
Is that insane?
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time after this, because I don't think people have fully grasped how impactful these laws are going to be. I think we know it because like you're up on the legislation. I'm just excited from like a HR practitioner standpoint that that's what's going to push us into the future. But I don't think people have truly comprehended how many states have passed the laws, how many more are to come, and all the things we are going to learn from like the pay reporting data. And especially like I'm excited about the EU stuff. Like I know.
Me too.
I mean, that to me is interesting. Like they do so many studies over there on the 4-day work week, like Iceland and their pay equity. And that stuff to me is like very interesting, because I think it can really shape the future of work, for lack of a better way of saying it. Like we have to change.
And you know who else is on the cutting edge of that stuff? Believe it or not.
Tell me.
Australia.
Ooh.
Australia just passed today, which we're recording this, I think, way in advance. Today.
Yeah.
They just
February
passed
12th today.
February 12th today, day after the Super Bowl. I guess we already talked about that.
We said
we did. They passed a law, the right to disconnect law, meaning that your employer can't text you or call you after you're off the clock, which we've seen that already, like in Portugal and some other European countries. But Australia also just released this year is their first year that they have to do public gender pay gap reporting. Before they were required to do gender pay gap reporting, but now it's public. And so I'm watching Australia very closely to see if they're going to start doing pay transparency stuff also. Like New Zealand is also kind of on the forefront of that too. But the right to disconnect stuff is amazing. And I think Australia also did a 4-day work week test run. So curious to see like where all that goes, because I mean, quality of life is just, it's so important. And I think like our parents growing up, work was kind of their life. And now it's just a means to an end. Like I would love to take the European mentality is like, I go to work because I have to, not because it's like my entire life.
When I look at the studies between like how much happier they are and what they've been able to do and the changes they've been able to make in work. And I think for so long, like there's such a difference between how the States view work and how Europe and the rest of the world views work. And I'm interested to see, like, with our pay transparency laws, do we then do what Australia did, like the disconnecting laws? Do we think more? Because I know there's so many HR people that want to make these changes. I said this earlier, but they're beholden to their executives or their C-suite or their founders, and they can't actually make the change. And now that we have laws on our side, we're going to see things moving forward. And so I'm just interested to know if we're going to get more of those types of laws in the States. Like, have you seen this like growing sentiment for this?
Not really. I mean, Maryland, I believe it was Maryland, did the 4-day work week test run. They had like tax benefits for employers who were doing it, but they were the only ones who did it. I mean, internally, we have like this work stream internally at Payscale. We're calling it the best place to work stream. So we brought people from like all different orgs within Payscale, and we've said like, what things should we implement that we can take up to leadership what things should we implement that's going to make this the best place to work? And we're remote. Like we are fully remote. So like Wednesday lunches are not going to be a thing for us, right? Like goat yoga is not going to be a thing for us. Right? So I mean, like, but that's like one of the things we're talking about is like, I think a 4-day work week would be really hard to implement, but like, do we do summer Fridays? Like a lot of my friends have summer Fridays at work where they work till noon on Friday. And that's the end of it. Like they go Monday through Thursday until noon on Friday in the summertime.
Dreamy.
I love the summer. So dreamy.
I love the summer. I'm like, please.
I hate the summer because I live in Texas and it's really hot here.
It is also really hot in Washington, D.C. It turns into a swamp and then I just stay inside all day anyways. I'm an inside person in the summer. I'm like an outside person in the fall and the spring.
Me too. I think we would be best friends if we lived in the same place.
Yeah. I'm like hoping it happens someday. Come to DC. We can hang out.
I will come to DC. Actually, I come to DC often.
It's a great place to be. The laws are just so fascinating to me. Back to laws, because I think about this all the time, and you're a lawyer, and I guess you think about it all the time.
Sometimes
all the time.
Just sometimes.
I love that you're doing that internally at Payscale, though, because that's so important in like asking the employees what they want to. Because I think a lot of people are getting to the pay transparency laws and they're like, oh, I have to do this. But then they forget your employees really want you to do this.
Yep.
And I think it has such an impact on culture. So have you observed anything where we're just talking about culture, where like these pay transparency laws are actually helping people build better workplace cultures?
Yes, I think is like the automatic answer, but I think we've seen it backfire for companies who don't do it right. So, for example, one of the other reasons that companies are really afraid of doing pay transparency is because they're like, well, crap. Like, okay, let's talk about the Great Resignation period of time where people were paying just absurd amount of money to get people into the door. Right? Absurd.
Yep.
Especially engineers. I'm going to pick on engineers all day long because engineers, I feel like, got just the craziest like salary increases just by moving companies. But what we've seen is like, okay, so let's say your engineer, like your entry-level engineer is making $150,000 at your company. But you're like, oh my God, it is 2022. We are competing with like the creme de la creme of companies. We've got to get the best engineers in. So you post a range where the low end for the same job that this person is doing, the low end is $200,000. So this guy who's been working with you for a year or two sees the posting and is like, what the heck? Like you guys just posted a range 50,000 more than what I'm currently making at the low end. It's going to backfire. This guy's going to leave. He's going to jump ship and go get paid somewhere else. But at Payscale, what we ended up doing is when pay transparency became a thing, we were like, when Colorado first came out, we were like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, should we just post ranges for everybody? Because at that time, we still weren't fully remote. We were like, do we just post ranges for everybody? What do we do? And we were really fortunate because we had leadership that said, we got to post ranges everywhere. So we kind of took baby steps. So we said, we're going to post 2 types of ranges. One is a national range and one is a high cost of living range. So the high cost of living range was, Seattle, LA, Chicago, New York, DC, SF. Yeah. And then we did that for a year. And then we started hearing complaints from people like, why are you punishing me for living in Idaho?
Yep.
Right?
Well, the cost of living is much cheaper in Idaho.
100%. But like, why are you punishing me because I decided to move there during COVID?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was like 2 schools of thought. One school of thought was, no one forced you there. So sorry. The other school of thought was, well, then why aren't we just paying everybody equally, regardless of where they are? And this is where I sit. I sit in the school of thought of like, it doesn't matter where somebody lives. Like you should just pay them what they're worth.
Location
regardless
agnostic.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So then we decided, okay, fine. We're going to have one salary range for everybody, but we chose the high cost of living range. So every job post, so we have one range for every job that we have, and it's calculated with the high cost of living range, not the national range, which was like slightly lower.
Yeah. That is amazing. That's very forward thinking. I had this debate till I was blue in the face about being location agnostic or not. And I'm literally telling you, I worked with people in the past that were like, well, this person lives in SF and we definitely have to pay them more. And I'm like, I don't make decisions based on that. I make decisions based on, do you have the qualifications and are you at this level for the role? But I got a lot of heat for it back then because people were not happy about that stance. The people I worked with were like, we don't agree with that.
I think if you're a remote company, 100% location agnostic, I'm with you. I'm going to fight behind you and stand on ground with you on that. However, if you are requiring somebody to go into an office in SF, I think that makes a difference if you have offices in different locations, right? So like if you've got a San Francisco office and a Nashville office, maybe there's an argument for paying the Nashville folks slightly less than your San Francisco folks because you're forcing them to move to that area of the country and you're forcing them to go into an office. But for remote work, 100% location agnostic is where I fall.
There's so many debates within pay transparency, just like working internally on the work. I want you to write me a guide, like Lulu's guide to pay transparency, what you should and should not say. Here are the legal things to say.
Yeah, exactly. Here are the legal things to say. Here's what you guys should post. I mean, we tell our customers all the time, like, if you're going to just post for all your roles, go look at the most, it's not restrictive, but like look at the law that has the most requirements, which is probably a toss-up between, it's probably Washington has the most requirements because you have to post a general description of benefits too. Yeah. But everyone does that. Like, who doesn't post a general description of benefits? Yeah.
Like JD.
Like, you're going to get 401k and healthcare and pet insurance and fertility treatment, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, they're not that different. Like, no one's reinventing the wheel here. Like, every time I see a new state, like today when I looked at Minnesota just proposed a law today. And I went to go read the law and I was like, oh, cool, great. It's like literally they copied and pasted from New York's law, or they copied and pasted from, someone else's law. So they're not, they're purposely not reinventing the wheel because they know that multi-state employers have to comply with everybody. But there's a federal law that they've been looking at that's like being considered. I don't think it's going to go anywhere this session, at least.
What is it?
But it's a pay transparency law. Yeah, that all employers would have to post ranges.
I mean, you and I talked about this. The federal government is pay transparent. You literally know how much everybody makes as a government employee, down to their GS. You know their GS. You know how much money they're making. There's no games. You know you're getting paid exactly the same as somebody else at that GS level within your government, whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's wild. My sister works for the government, so I ask her so many questions about this all the time. She's like, you can look at my salary. I don't care.
Was it USA Job? No. California was California Transparent or something.
But then, so then if they passed a federal law, would these states continue passing a state law or no? At that point, they would just say the federal law exists. We don't care anymore.
So I think it's kind of like minimum wage. I think states would pass more restrictive laws. So like they would say, okay, the federal law is like your baseline. We're going to require employers to do more. So I could see like the Californias, Massachusetts, and Washington's doing that, saying like, okay, the federal law just says you have to post a range. We're going to tell you what that range should look like. We're going to tell you have to post a general description of benefits. We're going to tell you la, 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 la. But I think honestly, like it hurts. I would love to see a federal pay transparency law pass. I think it would just be completely epic because it puts so many people at a disadvantage. Like I was speaking at a conference last year, and we did like a live poll. There was probably like 400 people in the audience. And we had them do a live poll. Would you apply for a job if it didn't have a range in it? And in my head, I was like, no way. Like it's going to be like 90% would say no, 10% would say yes. And it was split 50-50. And I was like, why? And then I remembered people like me don't live in a state with pay transparency. And then you're forced to apply for jobs that don't have ranges in it. Right? Even though 1 in 4 are subject to some sort of pay transparency law, there's still a big chunk of the country that employers aren't required to do it. We are finding more employers are doing it, which is amazing. But it's still sad. So I would love to see federal law come into place.
Okay. Well, that's a nice segue to like talking about the future. So a federal law, maybe. Any other future trends or developments you think we're going to see in pay transparency laws and how HR people, maybe how they could be prepared for these? Like not saying you have a glass ball. What's the thing that you tell fortunes with it? Yeah. If you're telling a fortune, Lulu, what do you tell us? A glass ball.
If I'm reading the coffee leaves,
what would you
like
predict
we do in
would
our
happen?
cultures.
Yes. If you're reading the coffee leaves, Lulu, What are we doing? What's
are we
happening?
predicting?
What are the future laws? What are you predicting? What other future laws do you think and developments could happen in pay transparency?
So I think we're already kind of seeing it. So it's kind of cheating. We're going to see, I think, a lot more developments in AI. So, for example, California and Ontario both have proposed bills that require employers to disclose if they're using automated decision tool making in their recruitment. So no longer will your CVs be read by a machine. If it is read by a machine, then you have to disclose to your candidates that, like, a robot read your CV. And then in California, they're even considering an opt-out feature. So if you apply for a job and you have the disclosure, you can opt out to say, I want a human being with eyes read my CV instead. I don't know where that's going to go, but I'm watching it closely. Ontario has just the disclosure law that, like, if you're using automatic decision tool, automated decision tools, decision-making tools, yes. I think is what it is.
Yeah.
Then you have to disclose it. So I think that's going to be a huge thing. Because again, that also goes to biases. Like, AI is inherently biased. So if you're also using AI to build ranges, there's bias inherently in the rate. Like, there are still, unfortunately, jobs that are more tailored to women and jobs that are more tailored to men. I mean, look at tech, right? Like, we're still seeing in STEM, a lot of men are in STEM versus women. So, like, those ranges are going to be higher. So I think that's going to be super interesting. I think the next thing also is going to be that pay communication we kind of talked about, which is like requiring employers to tell their incumbent employees, what's the next level look like? What does your range look like? Where do you fall within that range?
So many people are going to bumble that. So many people are going to mess that up.
I think so. But I mean, with these laws, there's always like a period of throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And then if you get sued, then we'll fix it sort of thing.
That's why sometimes they say HR is retroactive, not proactive. Actually,
I like to think of it as proaction. I try and help be proactive as opposed to retroactive. So I think those will be the future.
I love that. I mean, the one where you have to tell them what comes next excites me because then it makes internal leveling a real priority.
Yes.
Because I see so many business leaders that are like, well, I feel like this person is more senior. And I want to be like, personally, I could give less shits about your feelings. I care about the facts. Like, does this person actually have the qualifications to be at the next level before you tell me they are? And so I think that it's going to require a lot of HR people to like really look internally and clean up the house, for lack of a better way of describing that. Because leveling to me is the part that I think a lot of people still don't do or really misunderstand. And I'm like, if you have a right leveling system in place, everything from hiring to promotions becomes so much easier.
It's so much easier.
You like have the tools. Yeah. But we have to like make the time to do it.
Yeah. I mean, like, we only have, like, at Payscale, we're a couple hundred employees. I mean, we're like close to 800 employees. We have one compensation person. And bless her heart. That's what we say down in Texas. Bless her heart. But truly, bless her heart, because she has to like level. She like builds our job architectures and leveling because we're basically like three companies in one at Payscale.
Yeah.
Like, we all grew by acquisition. This is before I joined, but she's still fixing the holes that we have. But going back to what you said about like, I feel this person deserves a promotion. I feel like Hebba and I should make $900,000 a year at the top of that range too. Like, but like but that's what people do. To back it up. You need data to back it up.
People come to me and be like, I think this person needs a promotion. And I'm like, tell me why. Literally tell me why. And so like, if I as an HR person don't have the map to say, like, I think of leveling as like your map. It is going to guide you through every single decision. You don't have to do a gut check. You don't have to listen to that person's opinion. You don't have to do, like, you know what I mean? Everything becomes fact versus a feeling. And then also it solves for inequity because people will come to you and try to promote people who are like them. We see ourselves in other people. So we say that person is like me. They approach things the same way. Like, they're definitely deserving of a promotion. And sometimes we overlook others who might have more contributions on the team because we gravitate towards more so what we think the promotion should be like. And so HR people listening, having like leveling in place, even starting simple, like 3 levels, 4 levels, 5 levels, and building upon it is just going to solve so many problems before they become problems. I can't say that enough. Okay, our time together is almost done.
We should just add implicit bias training to every people manager requirement too.
There's so many requirements I have for people managers in my mind. No one would be a people manager. To pass all of my requirements, I'd be like, you have to be trained on 17 things before I trust you. It's like trusting new people. I guess like parents always say, like parents are always like, yeah, we figured it out. And I'm like, when managers are like, yeah, I figured out how to be a manager. I'm like, no. You probably caused a lot of trauma to someone. And then you figured out how, no. Parents figure it out. Managers do not. That is my hot take. Parents figure it out. They keep the children alive. Managers, they're not doing well. Okay, we've almost reached our end of time together, but how can someone get in touch with you? They loved everything you said. I'm sure they did.
Y'all can find me on LinkedIn. That is where I'm the most active. So just find Lulu Seikaly on LinkedIn. I post almost every day, whether it's about pay transparency or my cutie patootie dog Basil, who's a 90-pound Bernese Mountain Dog. He usually does better than the pay transparency posts. But if you want to stay up to date on all the legal things, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay in touch.
I love that. Yeah, that's how I found you. I was watching your posts for so long before I finally reached out to you, like a creeper. But now we're
same. I was watching your posts too, and I was like, she actually messaged me.
I was like, oh God, she's posting a lot of good stuff. So one time you posted a graph, and I was like, oh my God, that graph, it stuck in my head for days. I was like, I've been thinking about this graph. I really need to message Lulu.
Yes. Anytime. I get people messaging me all the time, but now it's,
I think it's very helpful. And trust me, I think a lot of HR people are going to appreciate this episode and truly want to connect with you because so many people want to make a change, and pay transparency plays a big part in actually making change for organizations and people and underrepresented groups. So I'm pretty stoked about the future for the first time ever.
Me too.
Every now and then I get sad about the future. I'm like, I don't really know. Are we going to be okay? And then I'm like, pay transparency laws.
Hopefully. For me, it's it depends on the day. But that is one light at the end of the tunnel where I'm like, okay, there are some states that are doing this right. So hopefully more will follow. More will be pressure to follow is what I'm really hoping happens.
I really feel like it's going to be you got to be a cool kid. You got to post a salary range. And I'm like,
why are y'all being left out? Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I post the salary range. We're all waiting, but I can't wait. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.